executive director. And this is actually our last support group for the summer. We'll take off June, July, and August. We may do something in July. And we're sort of at a lull for our activities, but we did just have Dr. Ari Tuckman doing one on productivity, which was excellent. And that one is still available. And his book is in print now. So we're excited about that, the Adult Productivity Manual. And I just was able to set up, we're going to have one on ethics where it's AI and how that, is involved with your practices. So it'll be ethics for mental health professionals and others that need those hours. And at this point, it's July 19th, a Saturday from 10 to noon. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to try again to do some in-person things in the fall. So if you've got some suggestions or some hankerings for topics or things you'd like to learn about, always feel free to share. And I'll give you a plug for membership because it does help. It's $40 a year for individuals, families, and educators, and $60 a year for mental health professionals. And you do get a discount on all of the events, but it really does help us continue to function. So if you have questions or anything, feel free. And I'm going to drop my email into the chat. And then we will have Dr. Asawa's handouts and this recording that we will share after. It would be great if you want the recording, if you let me know, give me an email because I may not have yours, and then I can send it to you if you're interested. So without further ado, Dr. Asawa has asked to put questions in the chat. She'd like to hold them till the end. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Okay, let me go ahead and get this pulled up on the screen. So I know that there's probably lots who can't make it tonight because we're kind of in the thick of things and during the month of May and nearing the end of the school year. And so I know from some of the people I spoke with who couldn't make it that we'll be able to share this video, and I'm happy about that because hopefully this will help other parents as well who can't attend tonight. But those of you that are here know me, but for anyone watching this later who doesn't, so I'm a licensed psychologist in Missouri City, and I have some information at the end of the slides about my practice and with my contact information to reach out to me if needed. But I've been involved with ADDA for a long time, for many years, and with the Fort Bend chapter. And I have, aside from kind of specializing in ADHD with my practice, where I provide evaluations for children and for adults, I also have three kids that are now 10, almost 13, and 15. And all three have ADHD brains. And so I feel like this is something that I just live and breathe every day. So, and this topic has been very important to me because it's something I've had to work on every summer with my clients as well as with my kids. And so I've developed some strategies and researched some things over the years. So I wanted to share that with you. And the big question to begin with is kind of why would this even be an issue? You know, why would summer break be challenging with ADHD? Because I think on the surface, people would say, well, school's out. So the summer is fun. And what more could the kids want than, being able to have that freedom? And so what problems could there be? But there's so many challenges, as you guys probably have learned in your personal lives. But I listed some of them here, the ones I hear about a lot with my clients and that I've had with my own kids. Less structure, the structure of school, of the school days can be more helpful than we would imagine with kids who have ADHD brains. Sleep gets disrupted, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that can have a huge impact on behavior and on ADHD symptoms. There's a tendency towards overstimulation because we've got lots of screen time, we've got lots of activity, we're doing different things every day. And we know that kids with ADHD brains, when they get overstimulated, can also be more likely to, act out, to make some bad choices. and be a little bit harder to manage those behaviors. There's lots of inconsistency in the summertime. It's not kind of that routine schedule that we usually have during the school year, which for neurotypical kids may be a little bit more easier to adjust to, but for our neurodivergent kids, that can be really tough to adjust to. There can be lots of boredom, and we know ADHD brains really struggle with boredom. The expectations are not as clear in the summertime. They're very clear during the school days, and in school, the schools and the teachers make those expectations very clear. But at home, it's just a little more wishy-washy. And so that's something we may struggle with. Environments are changing. We go on vacation, we go visit family, they go to summer camps, lots of changes in environments, lots of together time, which is wonderful, but then can also get pretty exhausting and tiring, and everyone can kind of get on each other's nerves a little bit. And of course, too much opportunity for screen time, which we'll talk about. And then just as parents, I think it can be tough because we just have fewer breaks. You know, we have to be on it all the time unless our kids are in camp. So there's a lot of challenges. And I know today is not a presentation about how the ADHD brain works. And I do have a past webinar that I did on that goes into lots more detail about this. And I have that on my website for anybody who'd be interested. But I just did this one slide with a quick review because this relates a lot to the strategies that I'm going to give you for preparing for the summer. So we know that ADHD is really just a neurological difference. It's a difference in wiring, particularly in the frontal lobe and cerebral cortex of the brain. But the frontal lobe we think of as the command center of the brain. And what we know from the research is that that part of the brain is delayed in its development in an ADHD brain. About the average is about 2 years or so delayed. So we see more immaturity in our kids with ADHD brains, and we see less volume and activity in that part of the brain. So when I'm working with clients, I'm often using the analogy of a light switch, and that this front part of the brain, it's like there's a light switch up there that when you have an ADHD brain, you just don't have the same level of control over that light switch. So it's not that it's always switched off. Sometimes it may be automatically switched on, but it's hard to control it. It's hard to decide when you're going to switch it on and when you're not. And so, and that's important because of on the right side of the screen, these executive functioning skills are what that part of the brain, that command center really helps us with. And because of that lower level of stimulation and that switch being turned off some of the time, we just have more trouble with those executive functioning skills. So just keeping this in mind, then I'll talk to you about some of the strategies and things that we can do thinking about this so that we can have a good summer with our kids. So these are the things that we know that they need, right? And if we kind of think about these things, we can try to check them off and figure out ways that we can address these things before the summer gets here so that we can set them up for success. And I'll talk about that a lot in this presentation, but that's the goal is we're trying to set them up for success, not for failure. So we need to do some things that we know they need. We know they do better with supervision. And of course, as our kids get older, we want to give them more independence and less supervision, and we want them to be able to function well without that supervision. But our kids with ADHD brains do tend to be a little bit behind in some of those skills. And so I do have lots of clients and parents over the years that have, because of the lack of supervision in the summertime, their kids have just unfortunately gotten into some bad situations, made some bad decisions, done some impulsive things that they regretted. And so we really do need to make sure we keep up the supervision. Structure is super important. I'll talk more about that. And lots of consistency, because the inconsistency they really pick up on. And their brains are already a little bit less organized internally. And so that inconsistency from us can just contribute to the chaos. They really need that structure and consistency. So part of that is also rules and making those rules very clear. So I'll talk about that. Lots of positives like praise, lots of incentives to kind of keep them motivated to make the right choices. And then on the right side, the first three there all relate to just taking good care of their brain. We know if their brain is already understimulated, then we need to make sure we take good care of it so that it can function at its best. So they need to continue to have good sleep. They need to eat healthy food. They need to have lots of opportunities to exercise and move. And they just need playtime. And that's what the summer is all about as well. But we don't need to fill up their entire summer with camps, with activities. They do need some just unstructured, fun replay time. And then they also need academic support. And this one is probably not going to sound great to them, but but they do need it. And I'll talk to you more about why. So if some of these I'm going to just talk a little bit more about because I think they're super important. Structure is, I started with that one because I think it's probably the most important. And it's the thing that really gets lost during the summertime. And that's where I see a lot of behavior issues and a lot of family conflict come up. So if you can take a little bit of time before the summer starts to figure out how you're going to structure things, and we're not talking rigid structure, it doesn't have to be every day is scheduled at 9 a.m. We're going to do this, at 10 a.m. we're going to do this. That actually would be really difficult to maintain and to be successful with. And we're trying to set them up for success, right? So just general structure and like having a daily routine that's flexible, but that they have a general idea of what needs to be done every day. So I have an example up here. But it can just be kind of categories of things that we need to make sure that happen every day. Like maybe they need to do a chore every day. They need to have some reading time every day. And, make sure that there's some important things as part of that daily routine. And I always keep it visual. And I've done it different ways with my kids over the years. Use dry erase boards, use magnets on the fridge. We've used let's see what else. I don't know. We've done several different things, but we always have some sort of general routine that we follow when we're at home. And then as part of that, the screen time suggestion that I have is to delay it. So they're going to, of course, probably have some screen time in the summer. And that's what we all are going to battle over probably the most. And some ways to handle that are delaying it is helpful because if they start the day on their screens, then you're already kind of going to start with a battle. You're going to have to get them off of those screens at some point, which is going to create some conflict and tension. And if you can delay that time, then the other benefit is in the mornings is when their brains are most stimulated and functioning best. So they can actually do better in the mornings when they need to do some of their academic work that they might need to work on, or they need to do some chores. That's the time that would be really helpful to work on some of those things. And another piece of that structure is limiting that screen time. I know everybody talks about this, but what I see a struggle with is when we try to limit it after the fact. When the summer starts, they're on their screens all the time. And then at some point, we've had enough and we say, okay, this is enough, too much screen time. Now I'm going to give you, 1 hour tops. Then there's going to be huge meltdowns, huge struggles and battles. So if we just start the summer with that structure in place and those limits in place, then they adapt to it much quicker. Another thing we do is for the entire summer, just create a family summer calendar and keep that hanging on the fridge or somewhere where everybody can see it. And it's just gives the kids an idea of what's going to happen. They know what's coming. They're mentally prepared. They know when the vacations are or when the fun activities are planned. It just keeps them, it kind of staves off some of that boredom and keeps them excited and motivated. We also always, and I've done this with clients, also had some weekly activities that we build in as part of the routine. And again, doing this, creating this routine, it's going to prevent some of the issues later on throughout the summer. So let's say one day, just out of the blue, you tell your kids, okay, guys, we're going to get laundry done today. We're way behind on laundry. You're going to get crying and whining and arguing and back talking. And instead, if we say, okay, every Sunday is laundry day, and that's what it's going to be the whole summer, and we're going to put it on the calendar, then every Sunday, the kids know what to expect. They may whine a little bit, but they're going to adapt to it and they're going to start to fall into that structure. We always, every summer, have a library day, and I think there's been a lot of benefits of that. Obviously, it supports reading, but the other nice thing is we go there, we spend a chunk of time, and the library offers lots of fun free events. But even if the kids don't want to do those things, they can spend some time looking up books that they like. They can do some reading time, and they can have a little bit of independence. They can go, you can encourage them to ask the librarian if they have questions. That's really good for them. They also can practice some self-control and impulse control, keep using a quiet voice, not running. So there's a lot of benefits of having that library time every week. And then I think you don't have to entertain them every day and have a million fun activities out of the house planned. That can be expensive and chaotic and hard on us. So I think it's nice to just maybe do one day a week, like a fun Friday. And what we've always done is kind of created what we call a bucket list, for the summer, and everybody gets to add ideas to it. And then whatever that day of the week is where we're going to go do something fun, we can choose something from that bucket list. And kids with ADHD brains love novelty, right? Something new and something exciting. It's something to look forward to, and it motivates them throughout the week. So when you're trying to get them to get their chores done and wake up and fix their bed and do other things, they've got this fun activity to look forward to, which is motivating. So I also would really recommend keeping up the meal times. I know the summertime is a time where everyone just kind of eats whatever and grazes in the kitchen. And the problem with that with the ADHD brain is that we know that food stimulates the brain, but particularly protein is really helpful in stimulating the brain. And I know my kids in the summer will struggle with just forgetting breakfast, right? They'll just be busy doing other things and they'll forget to eat breakfast. And before I know it, I have a really hangry kid that's getting upset and frustrated. So they need to keep up those meals, and they're going to gravitate towards the unhealthy snacks, especially in the summertime. And a lot of our kids with ADHD tend to gravitate towards sweets. So I really recommend preparing a little bit at the beginning of the summer and getting some easy to grab healthy snacks, have them very accessible in the pantry and the fridge, and just have them there. And that way they're more likely to grab those throughout the day when they're hungry. Chores, super important, because kids who do chores are kids who are successful, adults who are successful later in life. There's lots of research on that. So absolutely, the summer is a great time to incorporate chores, and they don't have to be horrible and take lots of time. They can be fun, they can be quick, but it's something that they can get in the habit of doing. So that's structure. A little bit about sleep. I have a whole webinar that I did on sleep, and I have that recording on my website. There's a lot of information about that. But the main things about summertime and sleep that I want to say are, for our kids with ADHD brains, it's really helpful to just not make any major changes, because that routine, that sleep routine, is something that we work hard to get in place, right? And we try to be very consistent so their brain adapts to that and gets used to winding down and falling asleep. If we disrupt that in the summertime and just throw that out the window, it really creates a lot of challenge for us, because then we're going to have to work hard to get that back in place before school starts. So, and we're going to have kids that are tired and grumpy and irritable and more likely to act out, worse ADHD symptoms. And so keeping them on some sort of similar bedtime routine is helpful. Of course, you can stretch that. They can stay up a little bit later and have a little flexibility, but try to keep things as consistent as you can. We know that school age kids need really anywhere from 9 to 12 hours of sleep. And so if they're staying up till 5 in the morning and then they're up again at 8 on their video games, that's going to have an effect, especially with our kids. It will have an effect. You'll see that negative effect. So I think one thing to think about is before bedtime, the level of stimulation that's happening, which is a bigger issue in the summer, I've seen, than the school year. So they're more likely to be, staying up late, having caffeinated treats and drinks on their screens, eating lots of sugar. And if we do that, if it's kind of a free-for-all, then again, there's going to be consequences for that for us, and in the behaviors and in the ADHD symptoms. So reducing the stimulation before bedtime. And then what I've always done with clients and with my own kids is starting to shift bedtime back in place. So let's say we stretch it during the summer, start to shift it back at least about 2 weeks before school starts. because we don't want to just suddenly say, okay, school tomorrow, got to wake up early. That's not going to go well. And then the beginning of the school year is going to be a struggle. So we have to kind of think ahead as parents and start working on that a couple weeks early and get things back on track. Movement for our kids is so, so important. And the reason is I have just this one little picture example here, but the reason is what it does for their brain because it does stimulate their brain. It gets that switch turned on, which means it's going to then enhance those executive functioning skills. It's going to prevent the ADHD problems that we're seeing. So we need them to move. And an added benefit is the more they exercise during the day, the easier it's going to be to get them to bed at night. It's our kids who are sitting all day on video games and then we're trying to get them in bed. It's just hard for them to wind down. Their brain is overstimulated, their body is not worn out, and that's going to be more of a struggle. So daytime exercise is so great. And there's lots of great active summer camps. The summer's a great time to do water activities, which has the added benefit of giving them some sensory input. And a lot of our kids are sensory seeking, and that water play is so helpful to many of them, and soothing, swimming, splash pads, sprinklers, water tables. There's so many options. And outdoor play, of course, be careful with the heat, but it's just so good for them to be outside. And anything that we can do like this is keeping them off those screens. And so it's helping create a balance. So one thing our family's done with playgrounds and other families I've worked with is trying out different playgrounds throughout the summer. It's a great time to test out all the different playgrounds in your part of town, or travel to some really cool playgrounds that you've heard about. It's something new and fun and exciting for the kids. It gets them outside. And if they are inside, find ways for them to move. Keep fidget toys on hand. We always had one of the little mini trampolines in the house. My sister she has 4 kids and a whole household of people with ADHD, and she has lots of opportunities for her kids to move. They're always rollerblading, jumping rope. They have those balls that you can sit on and bounce around the house. There's just lots of ways they can move even when they're indoors. So think about that before the summer arrives, and you'll be glad you did. And this is just a little reminder that they need play. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. They have to be playing. Like I said before, we don't have to schedule every minute for them. Just tell them go outside and play for a little bit. But again, the supervision piece is know where they are, know who they're playing with, check in, keep an eye on things, make sure to go over rules. They need that oversight, but they also need some of that unstructured playtime. So here's the academic piece. We know for our kids that the school year is often a struggle. We spend all year, trying to get them to function, oftentimes in learning environments that are not designed for them. It's it's tough for a lot of our kids to get through the school day. And we don't want to force them to then spend the whole summer also doing academics. I know that's not what they want to be doing. So I'm not talking about spending the whole summer doing this. I'm just saying build in just a little bit. What I think of it as is learning time, just a little bit of learning time every day. And part of the reason for that is that we don't want them to get out of the habit, right? They need to be in that habit and that mindset of doing a little bit of learning every day, because if they take 3 months off from learning, and then again, we try to get them back on track in August, it's going to be a struggle. So, and that learning time can be fun, and it can be interactive, and it can be multisensory. It doesn't have to be doing something boring and tedious. And this does prevent summer slide. We know our kids can forget a lot of what they learned during the school year, especially our kids with ADHD brains. And so the summer is a great time to reinforce their learning, to practice, to focus on areas of concern. With my kids, all 3 different ages and different areas of concern, I would just think about, okay, what's something each of them can work on during that learning time? Sometimes it's just reading time. It could be tutoring. If you have your child signed up for tutoring once a week, then that could be their learning time for that day. But just a little bit every day. And I would also say keep it hands-on whenever you can, using manipulatives, using flashcards, getting them up and moving around while they're practicing, playing board games, and mix it up throughout the week. Don't do the same thing every day. So if they're working on times tables, they can do a computer game on Monday. They can do flashcards with you on Tuesday and do manipulatives on Wednesday. You can mix it up and that gives them the novelty that they crave, but they're still focusing on practicing the same thing over and over, which is so good for them. And that's what helps it really stick. That helps them retain the information. So behavior is a big one because this is what I hear a lot about with clients, and that's where a lot of the struggle comes in throughout the summer. So these are my general tips for managing behavior during the summer. We talked about adult supervision. Now, routines are not just helpful for us, but it prevents the arguments. So, like I said, if you just spontaneously give them an instruction that they weren't expecting or pull them away from something fun that they were doing, that's going to be tough. But if they know the routine and they expect it, they know they have learning time every morning just for a little bit of time every day, then it's less arguing. Um, for our kids, we really have to clarify the rules. So I also see this a lot with families is that um, our kids with ADHD brains tend to be curious kids, and so they will do things that sometimes are unexplainable. They can't explain it either, and they're just curious. They want to try things. They don't think before they do it, and so I think oftentimes they'll say, "Well, I didn't know that was something I wasn't supposed to do." And we'll be thinking, well, isn't that common sense? But for them, it's like, well, nobody told me that I couldn't do that. Nobody told me I couldn't eat candy in my bedroom. So we have to actually define the rules, make it clear for them. And I would even go further and say, make it visual because it could go in one ear and out the other. When my kids were younger, we always had a list on the fridge of the major house rules, and then I could refer back to that. I could be like, look, see that rule? Remember that? And that way it's not me constantly reminding them. For instructions, and you probably have heard this, but this really comes up in the summertime when we're trying to give our kids lots of instructions throughout the day. One at a time is helpful and really be very specific. So if it's time for doing chores and we say to them, okay, I want you to go clean your room. That's too vague, it's too broad. They're going to go up there, they may get distracted on the way, or they may get started and then they may lose motivation. And they may not know what to do next. So one instruction at a time and really make it specific. I think also we just have to be in the mindset that we have to give the reminders and the warnings. Those are just necessary. And I think if it's a one strike, you're out kind of situation, then we're setting them up for failure. And our goal is to set them up for success. So we give them the one clear instruction. We give a reminder, hey, are you doing what I asked you to do? And also even asking them to repeat it back. So we know they heard us and they processed it, then we're setting them up for success and they're likely to follow through and do what we asked. I use lots of timers and stopwatches and alarms. Those kinds of tools can be helpful. Again, it kind of takes it off me because if I set the timer, I say, okay, you guys have 5 more minutes and then we're going to leave to go to the library. And I set that timer, then when that timer goes off, they know that time's up, it's time to go. Let's see, the follow through on the consequences. This one is funny because I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with over the years that tell me, even young kids will tell me, yeah, my mom says that she's going to take away my toy, but she never does. My dad says I'm going to lose my phone, but I haven't lost my phone. They know, they see that we're not always consistent on following through, and they will latch on to that, unfortunately. They will take that gamble that maybe you're not going to follow through, so I'll go ahead and try it anyway. So I think it's really important for us to show them that we're serious, that one warning, we are going to follow through on that warning. And these kinds of things, just if we can put these things in place, you're just going to see fewer of those behaviors that we often struggle with. But the last one is actually the most important one, I think, which is to really pay attention to the positives. Our kids get so much criticism all throughout the year. They get far more criticism than they get praise. And I think it's really our job to kind of tip that scale and just really look for what they're doing right. In the summer, we spend more time with them in the summer, so that's also a really good time for us to do that, to see what the effort that they're making and give them some positive feedback for that. Um, and the incentives is a controversial one. So I know there's kind of two sides of that argument, whether incentives are a good thing or not. And I know a lot of parents I've worked with are hesitant to use incentives and rewards because they don't want their kids to do things for the external reward. And I just want to quickly tell you my thoughts on that, which just from decades of working with kids, kids with ADHD brains, they need external structure and they need external incentives because they lack the internal structure. And what's happening is they don't have those executive functioning skills at this point in time to be able to really think through what they're going to do and problem solve and um, regulate their emotions and to be able to make good choices, right? So right now, for now, one way we can do that is create good habits. We can motivate them by setting up some rewards and incentives, and that lets them practice good behaviors and good habits. And then the internal motivation will come. That's, I think, what everybody worries about is that, but now we're just teaching them to do something for the reward, right? But that internal motivation, it comes with maturity, with brain development, right? So we need to give them a chance to get there. But for now, we don't want to constantly be shaming them and setting them up for failure, right? They're going to make lots and lots of mistakes and make the wrong choice often. And instead of us constantly shaming them for that, making them feel bad for that. Let's set them up for success, show them that they can earn some good rewards for that. And then those behaviors become habits and they start to feel really good about that over time and they want to keep doing it. They see that it makes others happy, it makes them feel happy. So I think we just need to go about it a little bit differently with our kids. And that's the way that I like to think about this. And so this is just an example of a little praise chart, but I love using visuals for them, making it visual, and it gives them extra motivation. These are a couple other examples that I've used before. This color chart, these color charts are used in schools all the time, but they're oftentimes not used correctly. A lot of people worry that these types of systems can create shame in kids, and the real truth of it is it's not the system or the chart that creates the shame. It's the person using it and how they use it, right? So this type of color chart, the best way to use that is not to start at the top and start them on pink at the beginning of the day and then they drop down throughout the day. That's setting them up for failure. What they need is to start in the middle with a clean slate. They start on green. And then our goal is to use this as a motivator, not as a way to shame them. So we want to move them up. The goal is to move them up, not to move them down. If we have to move them down, give them a warning. They have to go to timeout or have timeout from an activity because they made a bad choice, then that's a consequence they have to face. But then they're back to green and they have a clean slate. They get to keep working on moving up. And our goal should then be really look for reasons to move them up, because when they succeed and they do well, they want to keep doing it. And that's what we're trying to latch on to. We're not trying to shame them into better behavior because that's not going to work for our kids, or for any kids really. So that's the way to use this type of system. It can be really, really beneficial and make kids feel wonderful about themselves if it's used correctly. This screen time checklist is a helpful thing for the older kids in the summertime, and I've done this now with my older kids, is, making sure they've got a checklist of things they need to get done, but they can kind of get it done in their own time, and then they get to have their screen time. And I would recommend putting a time on that screen time, a start time, because they find loopholes. They'll get up early and they'll get everything done really fast. And then they'll say, okay, I can get on my screens now. And then they want to be on their screens the rest of the day. They find ways around our systems. So I always tell them, you need to get these things done and you need to wait till this specific time. And you have this time limit once you're on your screens. So that way it doesn't get out of control. A question I get a lot is whether kids should stay on their medication over the summer. And that really depends. Just a reminder of the purpose of the medication is that it's turning on that switch that we talked about, stimulating the brain, so improving those executive functioning skills. So if we think about do they need it or not, it depends on what are your plans for the summer? Are they going to be going to summer school? Are they going to be getting some tutoring? And also it depends on your child. How severe are some of the symptoms and challenges that they're having? Do they really struggle with impulse control, and is that getting them in trouble a lot? Do they really butt heads with a member of the family? And it just depends on those factors. And I think I have lots of clients who have just made the decision that it is best to keep them on the medication over the summer, that they feel better about themselves, they make better choices, that's better for everyone in the family. And then I have lots of kids who have done well taking a break from the medication for the summer. So those are some things to think about. But a couple of advantages of doing it, at least for a portion of the summer, you can take that opportunity to monitor the effectiveness because we don't get to see them a lot throughout the school year when they're on their medication. And I think it's actually great to just be able to observe that firsthand and see, what does my child look like on medication? What side effects am I seeing that maybe they aren't telling me about? How effective does the medication seem to be? Do we need to make any adjustments? Because the summer is a great time to do that before the next school year starts. So that could be something to factor into your decision. So a couple things I want to talk about at the end here. I want to mention a few things about summer camps and then about vacations, because those are two important things that come up. With summer camps, I'm not going to give a list of options because there's so many options, and it really does depend on your child and their interests, and it depends on finances, is it affordable? I have a website at the bottom, that houstonsummercamps.com website. It does compile a lot of the different camps you can find around Houston, but it doesn't have all of them, of course. But I've found some good ones on there over the years. But these are the things I would recommend to think about when you're choosing a camp, is think about the things we already talked about. Do the camps provide structure, routine? Is there good adult supervision? Because our kids are going to need those things. Is it hands-on? Is it interactive? Do they get to move and have some physical activity, or are they just sitting all day? Do they get to socialize with their peers, or again, are they just kind of one-on-one throughout the day? And really think about their interests, because the summer is a great time to really promote their interests. And our kids with ADHD brains have interest-based nervous systems. So their nervous system lights up and is stimulated when they're doing something they're interested in, right? And they're going to be more engaged, and those executive functioning skills are going to kick in if they're doing something they're interested in. So in the summertime, we can really help them pursue those interests. And that is something that really creates a path to success for our kids. And it's hard to do that during the school year when they just have to get through school, right? But in the summer, we can really take advantage of that time. I would say no matter what summer camps you decide to do, always sit down and talk to them beforehand about the rules, what you expect. And like I said earlier, make those rules very clear and spell them out for them. And because that's going to help prevent some issues from coming up. And I've always talked to the leaders or the counselors ahead of time just to kind of let them know if there's anything that, my child might struggle with, or any tips that I want to share with them. Talk to them beforehand and then check in at the end and just see how it went, so you can help with some problem solving. And then the last thing is vacations. And this is, I know, also a big one over the summer. How do we, especially with our younger kiddos with ADHD, it can be such a challenge. And so we have to really pack our patience and not expect things to go perfectly. There's going to be lots of bloopers and imperfections in us as well. I think as parents, we hold ourselves to high expectations also. And we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break because vacations are tough. And I would say try to keep some things in place that I've already talked about, if you can. Try to keep some structure in place, some routine in place, the bedtime things that we talked about. Anything that you can transfer from your normal daily life and bring that with you is going to really be helpful for them to keep things a little bit smoother on vacation. Again, discussing the rules and really spelling them out clearly because they need that every single time they go into a new environment. They need to know what are the rules and what are the expectations. This idea of doing a digital detox, I think, is a really, really good one. And it's so good for our kids to have a break from those screens, and they don't really need to be on them when they're traveling and doing fun things. But you can also do screen-free zones. So maybe they can be on their screens during the travel time, but once you're there, no screens. Or once you're at the beach, no screens. Having screen-free zones. I know we did a trip last summer, I believe, to Canada. And with all three of our kids, we just set that expectation up at the beginning of the trip that we'll let you be on screens for a little bit while we're traveling there. But once we're there, we're not doing screens. And they complained, they weren't happy about it. But we had such a good time. And even my 15-year-old was playing with his sister and brother. They played board games again. They were playing card games. They were running around chasing each other. It was wonderful to get to see them just being themselves and not, with something in front of their face. And they enjoyed it too. Even my 15-year-old talked about how nice that was afterwards. Prevention is big with vacations, just making sure that you're doing things beforehand to prevent issues from coming up. So for our kids, we need to make sure they have snacks available, make sure they're getting their sleep, which includes naps for our younger kids. Keep fidget toys with you all the time because when there's times they have to be buckled in and they have to not move, that can be tough, and we need to let them fidget somehow. Lots of opportunities to stay active. I know what we did when we would do long car drives. I would just plan in stops that included physical activity, not just a quick stop to run in the gas station, but I would actually look for playgrounds on the map that were on the way to our destination or some fun outdoor just activities that they could do. And we would get out of the car sometimes for an hour, just let them burn off energy and then get back on track. That's so helpful. And that tendency to get overstimulated, building in some quiet time, places like Disney World and Universal Studios, very overstimulating. And I think it's really important to build in some quiet time. And that doesn't mean being on screens because those are stimulating. So again, just an example from our trip when we would do quiet time, I made sure they had books with them that they could read, board games that they could play, but just quiet, calm activities. And it really does bring the whole level of stimulation back down. Um, and just be prepared with supplies and activities for times that you might need them. And again, most important thing, keep up the praise because I think when we go into these vacations, we are stressed as parents. And so we're already on edge. And we have that tendency to nitpick every little thing and tell them, stop that, don't touch your brother, sit over here. And I think we need to really be intentional about looking for opportunities to praise them and keep encouraging them because you'll see the behavior improve when you're doing that. And you'll see it start to deteriorate when you're really picking at them a lot. So I think that's something to just keep in the back of your mind. So a final thought is just a reminder, and this is a reminder for me too, and for all of us, is to slow down in the summer because all year long we're just going during the school year. We're trying to get them through the tough days. There's lots of frustrations and arguments and honestly, and they just grow up so fast and we only have these 18 summers, right? And each one, it just flies by. And so I think the summer is such a good opportunity to just slow down a little bit and really see them for who they are at that moment, because next summer they'll be someone different. And so, seeing who they are right now, what do they like to do? Like my son likes to play Scrabble, my younger one, and I think that's so cute. And so it's just so fun to just sit and play Scrabble with him every once in a while. And I think it's just nice to take that time to build some connection with them, because the school year is going to start and it's going to be back to the craziness again. And we don't have lots of opportunities for that. So that's all I have. This is just a little summary of my practice and the other school psychologists who work with me, but I have my website and my contact information. And like I said, on my website, I do keep lots of resources. So past webinar recordings, I have articles on there, some great websites that I like. And I always try to keep some good referrals on there as well for therapy, for psychiatrists. So feel free to check that out or to contact me if you need anything or have questions. So that's all I have.
Oh, it's
What
great.
questions, what
Oh,
questions do you guys have? I saw a few things in the chat, but I didn't get to look yet.
I was going to say, let me see what we've got. And I was glad to see that Robin had dropped her information in. I,
Oh, good.
in a rush, forgot that to say that Robin and I have co-sponsored this group for several years. So she's got a lot of good information there. So don't miss it. I did put in my email and our website. And again, if you want the recording, email me, because I won't have everybody's email. I don't see any questions in chat, but since
Okay,
it's a
good.
small
I
group,
I
how
have a
about we? I was
quick
going to say
comment.
let's raise hands. So Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to leave in a minute. I have another meeting at 8,
Okay.
parent meeting. But I just want, Lindsay, first of all, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful stuff. It's fun. I'm looking at it and thinking about what I used to do with my kids when the summer was there. So, and I miss those days. You are
I
so right.
know.
You are so right. It goes really fast. Pam knows that as well. But I wanted to tell you just one little thing you made me think about. I haven't thought about it in a long time. One of the things I did for from one of my kids that had to tinker and play. I did this coins in a jar, plastic jar. Every time you did something I thought was really cool. It was not centered on production. It was centered on person. Okay. And
Yes.
then they got these coins, and then we could go to a garage sale or a store. They had to count, there's math going on. You have to count your money. How much money do you have? Do you want to buy something? And they, could take even like a computer, an old computer, tear it apart, whatever, if the kid paid for it. And that's really good for those boys that have that ADHD right brain thinking, and they can try to put it back together, whatever. They bought it, they did it. And it was a fun summer thing. It distracted them from being bored. I mean, it just made me think of all those things I used to
So
do.
many, yeah, there's so many good ideas. That reminded me that my older son built a computer one summer with the help
Yeah,
of my
Wow.
brother. And that was such a great activity and so
yeah,
much learning
yeah.
involved. Yeah.
So, and crafts with the, I'm not trying to genderize this, but if guys like to do crafts too, if they go to garage sales and they buy crafts and they could sit around and sew it all day, whatever they wanted to do, it didn't matter what the outcome was, because it's garage sale, they earned the coins just for being themselves, and they had to count the coins. They had to figure out, should I spend it now or should I wait?
Yeah.
All that. But I do have to go. I have another meeting, but
Thank you,
I
Robin.
just want to tell you thank you, and thank you everybody who attended. And Pam, we've done this about 10 or 11 years,
It's
hon.
a long. I don't like to count.
Yeah. Okay. We're showing our age. Okay. Thank
Really.
you. All
We'll
right.
see you later,
Bye.
Robin.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Lindsay, can I get you to take your screen down
Oh,
now? And then
yes.
I can
Sorry, I
see
always forget
faces
to do
and we
that.
can see if somebody's got a question or wants to make a
Yes.
comment. This is your time, so feel free.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So everything that you said, Lindsay, is wonderful, but I don't have that structure in place since she was little. We
Okay.
just got her diagnosis about a little over a year ago with the ADHD. And so now everything is making sense about the way that she is. But what do I do now with an older kid who all these years didn't have that structure? And now she fights on everything because it's like, well, you never did that before, and
Yes.
doesn't want to implement anything.
So it's hard. It's an uphill battle at that point, right? How old is she?
14.
14. Okay, yeah, so that is hard. Well, one thing I can tell you is that they're going to fight the structure. Really, I mean, at any point, they're going to potentially fight it at some level, right? And to a different degree, depending on the child and depending on their age. But regardless of the fight, if you stick with it, if you just stand firm and kind of just let the complaints and the whining just kind of let it pass by you. I wouldn't get drawn into it back and forth about it, but if you can kind of just stand firm, don't waver on it. Just say that's just what we're going to do this summer. I think it's important. I think it's going to be helpful for all of us. So that's what we're going to do. And it really will eventually you'll get over that hump. I promise. It's just that when it's happening and when you're in the middle of it and they're so upset about it, it feels like you're doing the wrong thing and maybe this isn't going to work. And I
Yeah.
think you just have to kind of talk yourself through it and know that this decision that you made is going to be helpful and you know why you made it and that you will get to the other side. You have to stand firm on it. And that's again, it's like that inconsistency, like I talked about earlier, they really pick up on that. And they pick up on the fact that if they push us enough, we back down.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's amazing how many kids have told me that, literally verbalized that to me, and their parents were amazed that they could explain that to me. But because the kids are, it's so clear to them whenever we're not going to stand firm on something. And so I think if you and they will try, they will push. And if you just stick with it, then at some point she will realize this isn't going anywhere. I'm not getting what I want. So she'll move on and she'll adapt. It's just always a struggle at the beginning to get that going. And
Yeah.
then once you've done it this summer, then you can keep that going and it's going to be less of a struggle. So I still recommend doing it. I think the structure is so necessary. It's just, you're right, that it's harder to put in place when they haven't had that. And it's a little bit more of an uphill battle, but you're doing the right thing by trying to put it in place at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can
And
also, one other thought real quick, is you can involve her in it as well, and that can be helpful. You can explain why you're doing it. You can say, what are your thoughts on this? Like if we're going to structure the summer, how do you want to structure the days? What do you think we should build into our routine every day? You can involve her as much as possible, and that just shows respect for her thoughts and opinions, and if she's involved, she's going to be more invested in following that. Now, if she totally refuses to,
Yes.
to be involved, then that's okay too. But it's nice, I think, for you to offer that option.
Okay. That's a good tip. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Lindsay, it's Melinda. I was just gonna say that like we try to do structure and to go back to the last comment, Derek is now 10 and it's almost like it's gotten worse even though we've had it. It's just like the age where I could say the sky is blue and no, it's green and everything I say is wrong and I'm about to lose my mind. But anyway, that's not what
Yeah.
we're talking about. So going back to the summer, so my husband and I both work from home and it's
Yeah.
extremely busy. And this summer we're probably going to be doing less camps than normal. And we're probably going to have to rely on our daughter to kind of help out a lot too. But I think it's just we'll try to check in, and I don't think there's really a solution to that because that structure is probably not going to be as much as we want it to.
Well, and that's where that idea of the incentives can be really helpful. The rewards and the incentives and having, if he's willing to follow the structure, follow the plan for the day, then there's something that he could earn at the end of that day, and shorter term incentives are going to work better than longer term just because of the short attention span. The arguing back and forth, part of that is age. Definitely, because as they get closer to kind of that preteen
I was wondering
phase,
about that.
yeah, we see lots of increases in those kinds of pushing back behaviors. Even kids that were doing fine with the structure for years, there's going to be more of that just because of the developmental stage that they're in. And so some of that is probably what's happening. And it's a test also a little bit because he's pushing to see, are you going to fight back? Are you going to back down and let me do what I wanted? And so I think that's one of the challenges for us, is to just create that stability and that consistency, even when they're getting very chaotic and they're arguing and they're pushing back on things. If we kind of are that calm, consistent,
Calm?
we stand for, I
Yeah.
know that is so much easier to say than to do, I promise. But if that's kind of your goal and that's what you're striving for,
Yeah. No, I
it's
know it's important.
sticking with it, standing firm, not getting caught up in all of the back and forth, and not getting drawn into the arguments, because
Mhm.
all of that is also going to reinforce those behaviors, right?
Right.
But I agree with you. I think it's a little bit harder to have the supervision when you guys are working from home. And we definitely experienced that during COVID. And I know how tough that is when you have kids with ADHD in the house and you're trying to get work done. And so I think some of the things that help with that, aside from kind of the routines every day, is the busyness, keeping them active and busy. And
Yeah.
so having some things planned, some activities planned, some outside time, but with some sort of supervision, like you said, with your daughter nearby, an older child nearby, or a family member. But I do think that having some activities to kind of keep him engaged, keep him busy, it's going to be a prevention strategy,
Mhm.
preventing other issues from coming up.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned screen time, and we try like Monday through Thursday during school, he doesn't do any screen time. But then on
That's
the weekends,
awesome.
it's 2 hours max. But you would think if you talk to him that that's all he does because he's so obsessed with it. He's
Yeah.
obsessed. And
Yeah.
so I think he thinks summer's coming, I'm going to get it every day. And it's like, no,
No.
maybe we'll do an hour, but like you said, we'll go through those steps of you have to kind of earn it. So,
Yes. And one thing you could do is even break it into two parts of the day. And if he does certain things in the morning, kind of like that checklist, if he does certain things in the morning, he can earn
yeah.
his screen time, and then again in the afternoon
Okay.
and earn a little bit of screen time.
Kind of those small increments. That's good.
Smaller increments, yeah. And use
Okay.
that as an incentive. I think that those are some things to try.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Um, as far as supervision goes, I also don't think we have to micromanage them,
Yeah.
but check-ins are a good
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
Just checking in, making sure you know what he's doing, where he is,
Yeah.
who's there, are things under control, that kind of thing, and then getting back to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All good stuff.
I wanted to mention, because y'all were talking about teens and preteens. If you're not familiar, I put it in chat. Chris Dendy is was an amazing resource. She passed
Yeah.
away about 2 years ago, but she was a excellent speaker, author, and she was one of the first ones in the country to do books about teens. So she's got parenting teens, teaching teens, fathers and ADHD. But one of the ones she did the most was A Bird's Eye View. And it is written actually by and for teens. She had a group of 10 kids, and each chapter talks about the kid and how they feel about ADHD and so on.
Mhm.
And now she has a second version 10 years later that tells about, how they turned out, what they're doing. One of them's a chef, one of them's a DJ. And so I think part of the problem it is harder. My kids were diagnosed at like 4 and 5. So their
Mhm.
whole life they knew they were ADHD, and we were quite, open and blunt about it. And so I think when they're diagnosed later in life, it's got to be a little difficult at age 14, even though if she was struggling, I think part of it is a relief once you have a diagnosis because you're going, thank goodness there's a reason, but it's still got to be a little more difficult to
Yeah.
understand that. And I actually have somebody, Natalie Montfort did one for us on talking to your child about
Mhm.
ADHD. And I'll look that up. And so if y'all email me, I will see if I can locate that, because I do think that's something very important.
Yeah.
How do you talk about it so it doesn't sound
Oh,
like you got some, horrible illness or whatever, but to still impart the seriousness of it.
Right.
So anyway,
That's it.
Chris
That's
Dendy, I know you
interesting.
can find her on there. I think it's chrisdendy.com, but
Okay.
she'd be great even for somebody that's 10, because they do
Okay.
definitely start early with their mouth.
Especially if it's got the perspective of the kids, because even Derek the other day was saying something about he doesn't like having ADHD, and then I said, well, Derek, it's okay. We're going to learn how to manage it, and you just have to learn to live with it. He's like, well, isn't it ever going to get better? And I said, well, or it's never going to go away. He goes, well, then
Yeah.
why do I take the medicine? What is that for?
Oh,
'Cause
poor guy.
he thought that was going to fix him.
That it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
something it'll fix.
yeah, I'll
You
take
know,
medicine. I should be getting better.
I think it's so helpful to just talk about it with a balanced view, without emotion attached either way, that this is the way your brain is wired. These are your strengths, and these are the things that are challenges for you. And everybody has those, right? We all have strengths, we all have
Right.
weaknesses. Every brain has that. And so, but this is the way your brain is wired. And here's these things about your brain that are amazing. So we don't
Hmm.
want to change your brain.
That's
Right?
what I
It's not
tell
a
him. Don't
bad
change
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And we've been talking about all of it that way since the kids were little. And the nice thing about it is that now I'm hearing they have kids at school that will bring up that they have ADHD, and my kids will be the ones to tell them about how amazing their brain is. And that just like makes me
Oh,
so proud
I was going to say,
because
yeah, that's a
yeah.
proud mama.
Yeah, because I want them to feel that way, that
Mm-hmm.
they have amazing brains that can do some
Mhm,
incredible things, and they have some amazing talents. And it's because of the way that their brain is wired.
Yeah.
They're able to hyper focus, and they're so energetic, and they're so creative, and just all these amazing things. And so, and yeah, there's these challenges, but we're working on those, and we have things that can help, and we have people that can help. And
mhm,
so I think if we just constantly talk about it with that balanced viewpoint, then they start to take that on and internalize that
mhm.
and feel that way about their own brain.
Right.
So yeah.
We had done a couple of panels with Chris, and we do a teen panel and get like 4 to 6 teens who were very comfortable
Mhm.
talking about their ADHD. And it was always amazing because the kids in the room with their parents were like, well, this is bull, and I don't want to be here, and I'm not talking. But
Yeah.
once she asked the kids in
Mhm.
the front on the panel the questions, it all broke loose, and they were all
Mhm.
raising their hands and talking about it. And suddenly it was okay.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
I really would like to find somebody that we could do that with again, because I think you could even do
I
it
agree.
online, because it was just so incredible.
oh,
We did that in the Fort Bend chapter. We did it one time, and it was probably the most memorable meeting we ever had.
I
It was
bet.
so
I bet.
powerful to hear from these kids,
Mm-hmm.
and you could just see that the kids in the audience were just riveted and
yeah.
listening to every word. Yeah, I agree. We need to
And
do
it's
something
it's
like that
really
again.
good for the panel members too, because my
Yeah.
son had been in the audience, and then a few years later he was on the panel.
Yes.
And I think it really can be amazing. Let's
Yes.
work on that, because I really
Yes.
think that's so helpful. And it's helpful for the parents, because the
It
kids get
is.
kind of funny about it. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
mom, I told you I shouldn't have to do this, or I
Right.
told you that was
Mm.
hard for me and you didn't listen. So,
Yes.
And you
um,
know what? That's okay. Yeah, that's
yeah,
good
Right.
that they're validated and
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm putting that on here.
That's a plan.
All righty. Any
It's
more
so helpful.
comments, questions, etc.?
Just want to say thank you so much, Lindsay. I really appreciate your content. I'm a mom of 4 kids and one neurodivergent, and then he's 18 now, and we've been through lots of different ups and downs with him, and including a residential program because
Oh boy.
living at home did not go well. But he's learned a lot, and he's home now and headed off to a GAP program before college to kind of
Oh,
work more
great.
on those executive function and all the different challenges. But so I have
Wow.
2 other kids that are normal, normal brain or whatever, not neurodiverse. And then I have a 10-year-old who's still kind of like, we haven't quite decided. We probably need to do some testing, but she does have a real rigid personality. And I've noticed along the way, she does really well with all the structure, like all the things you're saying, like, yes, I've been doing that. I've been working on that. So, and I also am an executive function coach. So I work with adolescents and teens and adults who have ADHD. I've learned a lot along the way, right? But my biggest challenge with my 10-year-old is her emotional regulation. Because if
Mhm.
she gets triggered with something, she goes off the rails and it is like so hard to pull her back. And so the structure does really help to have the clear expectations because then she knows what to expect. But even then, something will happen with one of her siblings where they set her off and they're so hard on me. They're like, Mom, you're so easy on her. You give her whatever she wants. And I'm like, I've just learned a lot.
Right.
It's different now than it was with the older one. And I'm a different mom and I choose my battles wisely because I know when she's hot and she's like off the grid, emotional, like in her red, we call it. Like that is not the time to try to like work with her. That's when I'm like, you need to go calm down.
Mhm.
Yes.
But it
Mhm.
creates this like hotbed of emotions in the house in the summer, especially because then I'm like, oh, so I just want to say thank you. That was a lot to share, but just to say this is all I'm absorbing all of it and so thankful.
Oh, good.
I
Very
would
interesting.
echo that.
Thank you very
Good.
much. We had a nice evening. Our group was
Yes.
small, but we accomplished a lot, and I know people will be eager to get this recording. So,
Yes.
Um, can I ask you, Pam, what you mentioned at the beginning, I'm sorry, in the chat, is that your email?
that's
The
my email,
ADHD? Okay.
adaoffice@pdq.net.
Okay. And I
So
can
send
email
that
you.
on and I can send you. I was also going to include what's the name of the guy? Russ something. He has the book about where he puts everything in baskets. I'll think about it and I'll include it because that helped me a lot. Our older son was bipolar as well. And I kind of knew instinctively that we had to parent differently, but everybody's telling you, you're not doing it right. And he made me feel better about what would be in a C basket, really important in, other families' lives, might be an A or B in our life because we're doing good to just be, not blowing up, not, going crazy basically and having a huge meltdown. And that was a big relief for me. So,
That's a good point. Adjusting your expectations.
mhm,
Yeah. And not comparing to others.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Because that's
important.
so hard and
Mhm.
everybody wants to tell you how to do it. So,
Yes.
anyway, thank you all. We'll be in touch. Hope to see you again on Zoom. So, have a
Thank
good
you,
evening.
Pam.
All right.
Thank
Thank
Take
you,
you.
care.
Dr.
Good
Asawa.
night.
Thank you,
Bye
Pam.
bye.
Bye.